All right, I got Dr. Amy Albright on the show today. She is the founder of Holon, and this is an experience, guys, that combines the cutting edge of neurotech technology, real-time neurological breakthroughs, and spiritual teachings to create this unparalleled transformation for leaders and business individuals and entrepreneurs and the go-getters. Dr. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Joel. So happy to be here. It's going to be a
Yeah,
fun conversation today.
Yeah, really, really excited to connect with you. I get to connect with a lot of fascinating people in the health and wellness space, the biohacking space, and there's a lot of really neat technologies and just a lot of people in they're world changers like yourself. They're out there doing really impactful things, and they're helping us get results faster than a lot of us could get. And I think anybody in this high performance space, they want faster results with less effort and less time, and I think we're always just on this search to be better and break down some of those walls and things that have affected us in our childhood and how we show up as a father, husband, a spouse, a leader, all these things, right? And you're
Yeah.
doing some really interesting things in the neurofeedback world. And I had never heard of this. And I'm pretty, like I said, well connected. I know a lot of neurofeedbacks out there, and I never heard of this. And it sounds like what you're doing is vastly different. But before we even jump into that, I want to know, like, how'd you even get here? Because I'm sure getting to this space in your life where you're now, it's like, yeah, I just do Holon. This is what we do. But
Yeah,
there was
totally.
probably lots of pain to purpose story that got you here, or even led you to this idea that, man, this is what I really want to do. And this is going to get people more results faster than all the other spiritual and higher conscious things that you did in the past.
Yeah, totally. My journey started really young. So at 18, I had my first spiritual awakening experience. And in that moment, I went from being an atheist who was a hardcore skeptic, sort of studying neurosciences as an undergrad. I really thought that if we studied the neurotransmitters and the brain in a certain way, we would just understand our reality. So I
Mm,
went from that to having this massive experience where I could hear and feel and know things, and I could feel energy shifting. And anyways, it's hard to explain what happens in one of those pivotal moments in someone's lives in words. But that really set me off on a different trajectory. So I would say that um, I've been exploring into the space of how do we heal? What is reality ever since I was a teenager?
mm,
And along the way, I've just continued to reframe and expand out what it is that I believe. And one of my main teachers along the way has been my own body, because I have suffered from a long list of things, many of which are supposed to be not curable, and whenever I hear that, I'm like, yeah, you just double dog dared me, didn't you? Like, now I have to get rid of it. Thanks. Like, in addition to my own desire to be well, I also just don't want to hang out with something that is incurable. So I've been on a quest in that regard. For the health and wellness part, that's eventually what led me to get my doctorate in Chinese medicine. Is looking for a more holistic and integrated way of looking at the entire person. So going beyond the functional of blood work, but also into the spiritual and more metaphysical and ancient understanding that Chinese medicine brings. It's
mm.
really a teaching and systems that is profound. So it's been a whole bunch of all of those sorts of factors and dynamics kind of coming together with this serendipitous life of meeting different key people who are extraordinary, and one of whom is my colleague, who's the real neuroscientist of our team, Dr. Drew Pearson, about 13 or 14 years ago. And that was another major pivot moment in my life, where so many things came together. Because even with the understanding that I had from my own medical school training and from my undergraduate understanding of neurosciences, what it is that he and I brought when we started to talk was whole next level. And so, yes, it is. When you were saying earlier, it's a different way that I got here. That's for sure. Really questioning how reality is constructed, noticing that that we all have the ability to augment reality, studying the brain, and then also along the path working with peak performers, right? So everything from pro and semi-pro athletes to, when I was in medical school, through after I got out, I've been supporting executives and people who are pioneers and visionaries out into the space. So my first CEO when I started executive coaching was running a $3 billion company at the time. So, just going straight to those places where it's like technically, what is a doctor of Chinese medicine doing in executive coaching? But when we really zoom out and look at leadership, we have to be able to hold it. And I think this is really so much of where you're coming from with your work as well. We have to be able to hold it, that we have to take care of our bodies, our minds, our spiritual well-being, and that there's not really a distinction between how we're showing up in business or as leaders in how it is that we're showing up and taking care of ourselves and our organs and our systems and all of that. Like, in order to be a peak performer, there's not really a place we can leave a stone left unturned.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. You said a lot.
I know.
I have so many different ways I want to take this conversation, and some of the things I was thinking about what you just said. But what's really fascinating, I think, is that, if someone were to see you and just hear the beginnings of your story, they'd say, wow, you're like, I can identify with that. Like super left brain, analytical,
Mm-hmm.
18, yeah, very skeptical. Like, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
go into medicine because that's the science and all this stuff. But you had this spiritual, like kind of awakening. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think anybody that's listening can say, wow, I can relate to that person. I've been there. And now
Yeah.
you're on this, completely different trajectory, it sounds like. Um, when you think about this is, and I do want to talk about some of the results that you're seeing with people, like you said. I mean, I know using some of your neurotechnology and just your coaching, you've helped people 3x their businesses. And so people are going to be really interested to hear that, the
Yeah.
results and all that fun stuff. But also, I'm thinking before we even go there, but like when you think about just this idea of, spirituality and, you know, uh, you said you had this spiritual awakening. For you, what was it, I guess, was it a realization that, it says you used to be an atheist. You said you used to be an atheist. Was it just this idea of spirituality and like oneness or connectedness? And I don't know. I've been reading a lot. I've been going back and reading a lot of Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow
Mm-hmm.
Rich, and it's so interesting because he was one of the first ones who kind of pioneered like a thought is a thing, and this is what manifests. And you hear a lot of the gurus and the teachers out there, Bob Proctor, it's like it's just a thought, it's just an idea, and that's all it is. But at the end of the day, there's people that think things, they can think all their way about how they want to be rich every day, and they're still not rich. So it's
Right.
like, so what's happening there? It's like, well, can
Yeah.
I just think it? If this world, I always think about this, if this world is not really what we know what it is, it's the reality is what we think it to be, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, totally. We're setting the frame with our thoughts and our belief structures, whether they're conscious or subconscious. So, to answer your question that was in there, my initial breakthrough, and I would say thematically, my understanding wasn't about the oneness in the beginning. It was more about that we know that we don't know. We know that
Mm,
we don't know no matter how smart. We know that we don't no matter how much. I'm a hardcore learner of perpetual student. No matter how much I learn, there's always more to know. And no matter what we know, sometimes I describe it like in terms of a drinking vessel, just to make an analogy. So no matter what size of vessel we have grown into, we're inside of a container that's our current reality construct. And no matter what size of container we have that we can be aware of, that we can understand, we always have projections, illusions, or limitations in what we know. So when we continue to level up in our lives, not just in the 3D world, like let's measure leveling up, not just in terms of financial success, but fulfillment, depth of freedom, depth of relationships, like everything, right? That we're basically creating a larger construct for a container of our awareness, right? And we don't know what that looks like or how to get there. That's a lot of the times how people get hung up. But I don't know
mhm,
what to do. Rather than knowing what to do, know that you want to grow. Know that you're in a container of reality and that you want that next level of container of reality, because in that you'll have more bandwidth, you'll have the breakthroughs in your relationships, you'll have real fulfillment, you'll have all the stuff that you really care about at the end of your life, right? Like, and you'll have lived it the whole way through. So it wasn't because the oneness construct is so big and so nebulous. for me, I just wanted to stay inside of this practical search for meaning and for more information. Um, but to come to your question then of the Think and Grow Rich, like how come it's not working for everyone?
Yeah.
Because they're not really doing the work. So we
Mm,
can't just make a dream board and say some affirmations. I'm like this, I call this painting a coat of happy. I'm like, if you have a pile of dog poo and you paint over it, what do you have? Dog poo with paint,
yeah.
right? And so if underneath we just have some crap that we need to handle, I call it yuck, right? That's a technical term. Like you got some
Yeah.
yuck, handle the yuck, look at what's in there and get it really cleared out and clean. And from there, we build on top of solid foundations. So the difference between a painter throwing paint on a wall that's not been prepped and how the room looks for the next 10, 15 years versus if it's been prepped well. It's something that you can build on. It's something you can pull different elements and furniture and make something that you're really proud of and that can be resilient. Because the other thing that can happen in there, Joel, and we've seen it, is people can build empires, build wealth, build what they think is an amazing family or relationship, and then they lose it all,
Yeah.
right? And that's often because the foundation wasn't in place enough for that person, for that particular story, at least for their path, they needed to have a stronger foundation in place. So, how do we prevent that kind of thing? And how do we really grow and build in the ways that we care about and do it in a way that's real? All of this stuff has to be practical. That's another one I have a little bit of a sticker on. Is like, okay, great. Spirituality doesn't mean fluffery and it doesn't mean getting lost inside of like precepts that basically unground us from reality. The part of me that was rooted as a skeptic and is still rooted as a scientist is like, yeah, all this stuff has to be actually real practical,
Yeah.
right? We don't want to take high functioning people or people who have a lot of ambition and basically neuter them and tell them they should stop thinking about all of that. That is
Right.
not the goal, right? How do we turn it where we're putting our engines toward and our desire toward growing that larger container and having deeper and deeper alignment and integrity with what it is that what we really are, who we really are, and what that path is, while still being able to, do all of the things, right? Like we're not here to be aesthetic monks in caves, not at this phase, unless you are. But there's very few of us on this call that are. The listeners are not usually in caves doing monk things, right? We're out in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. That's so funny you say that. I used to always joke with folks that, yeah, it was really easy for the Buddha, or Nisargadatta to make all these claims about, nothingness and stuff. And I'm like, the guy's life was based on meditating all day. Like he wasn't actually out in the world. Now try doing that with a family and a
Totally.
mortgage and a
Right.
business.
Totally.
Like now put all that in. And I mean, I think there is a balance, right? But it's like just to be in a monk's situation when you're in a cave meditating, it's easy to say those things. But now like apply that into reality, right?
Right.
Where most of us
Right.
are at, right? Most of us are not in caves.
Yeah, most of us not. And I think that it
Yeah.
also could be intense as all heck to sit in a cave or to walk any of those paths. But certainly we have to make it clear, like, what are we doing now? What is applicable for today? And I say that as somebody who studied ancient science, right?
Yeah.
How do we bring it all forward? How do we integrate it? We're not going to have our power as an individual without being a part of community anymore. We can't think of ourselves as an isolated being that can just exploit and destroy the earth. It's not working out so well. And we also can't think of ourselves as uh, extracted from the roots of our past and these ancient traditions. It's also not going to work out that well for us. So, how do we bring it all together? How do we integrate ourselves, but how do we integrate the wisdom and the knowledge of everything that's helpful without being biased, without that skeptic taking over in ways that really limit and restrict, essentially, again, the container, the capacity of our awareness.
I want to ask you in your studies, in your, because again, coming into this, I think you're such a perfect coach and leader because you had that, you still do. That's part of you, the left brain, just very, I don't want to say skeptic, but just, very scientific. But where
Mhm.
did you find that science and spirituality actually blended together? And actually the same people that were very spiritual were
Right.
saying all these things, but actually science backed it up. So in a way that you could actually, I'm sure you have a lot of left brain clients, but you can say, actually, the practice that we're doing right now, whatever this exercise is, it's actually backed up by science, even though maybe monks were saying it years ago. They just didn't have the proof. Was
Yeah,
there any like big
totally.
exercise or big thing that you saw in your own life that gave you that breakthrough?
I think that even to some extent, Chinese medicine, which brings us down to those practicalities of like, yeah, uh, eat good food, go outside, sleep more in the winter. Like, there's just some basic stuff that it's like, well, it seems like maybe just superstition, or it could seem like, maybe not those elements, but some of it could seem like it. And then it turns out that there's actually, like within the herbal medicine, they'll say, oh, all of the things that are yellow tend to do these sorts of proper, actions. Like the
Mm,
yellows tend to fight infection. That could sound like it's just a bunch of, I don't know, philosophy or whatever. And then it's like, oh wait, as biochemistry catches up, there's actually compounds in there that do exactly what the ancient doctors knew.
mm,
And if we can just set aside how they got there, are they right? Are they right? And then, yeah, that they are great. So as soon as I started to realize that, and for me, I was very much, I felt chewed up and spit out by the traditional medical community here. Like the modern medicine was basically really devastated my health in so many different ways. And so as I realized that the traditional, let me not say that word, the modern paradigm of thinking was actually restricted and deeply flawed. And oh, and then here's another one. I started to do research as an undergrad, and I realized that anybody can massage data to make it look like kind of whatever,
yeah.
right? And I'm like, whoa. So if we hang our hats that science is God and we don't use our own creative understanding that we know that we don't know, if we get into that egoic block of all of that, we lose ourselves and we then create science inside of a container of restricted thought. Science is not God. Science is made by people who are flawed and who have limited ways of thinking that they don't know. And maybe they don't even know that they don't know. And so, how do we form reality? How do we understand what is possible? And yeah, I love keeping everything both loose and exploratory, and then also very backed by science. Yeah. Another whole phase of that really was when I started my work with Dr. Drew Pearson, when we started to collaborate and really deeply compare notes about neurology and about what's happening in the brain, and the phenomenological experiences that people have for spiritual capacities, intuitive capacities, and things like that. It's been, and that's been an incredible journey.
Yeah.
It's
Talk
free.
about that. I really want to hear about this neurotechnology and how you're blending spirituality and like how does it actually work? Like what are people doing? And yeah, and why is it so different than some of the neurotech out there that currently exist?
Yeah. Um, so neurofeedback therapy has been around since the 1960s, and I know you're a bit familiar with it. You mentioned that, and that's awesome. Most people still don't know what it is, and I would say that one of the main reasons is that it actually takes an extremely high level of skill to be able to execute that.
Mm,
And people don't necessarily want to slow down and learn the brain. It's not easy. Um, and letting somebody kind of work inside of that neurofeedback space is a high level of trust because it is the brain. So it's not been a huge field for all of whatever kind of political and or intellectual barriers that might be there. But nonetheless, it has been powerful. It's been safe, proven to be effective, researched at Harvard, Stanford, et cetera. Right. The thing that's interesting about it is that the majority of neurofeedback therapy has been thought about and used to help people with pathology. So, similarly to the old paradigm of modern medicine, of, well, you have a problem and there's a pill for that. And we only look at things when there's like an actual, you're about to lose a limb or something, right? Like, let's not get to, it's grown some, but it's kind of still coming out of those days. Neurofeedback therapy was like, well, we only really look at problems and we only think about problems. And so we can basically get somebody out of some of the heat of their, let's say it's ADHD, schizophrenia, brain traumas, things like that. But we haven't been looking at kind of more of a functional medicine approach to the brain. And how do we change not only its function, but how do we do that in a way that's about optimization? So we look at optimization in terms of um, cognition and function like sleep and hormone regulation and, those kind of things. But we also look at it in terms of being able to have those divine wisdom centers, the deep wisdom centers of the brain elicited to be able to make really good decision making and even to have intuition come online. So it's a very different paradigm than the sick and broken model.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you, there's a lot of people that will do neurofeedback for some extreme or not even so extreme. It could be brain injuries like TBI, right? It could be
Mhm.
ADHD, it could be schizophrenia, right? But it sounds like from what you're saying, the people that are typically coming to you, they're not plagued with some of these catastrophes. They're just looking at how they can be better optimized human beings, better leaders, better husbands,
Yeah.
fathers, and making better decisions, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, totally. And often people have a little something and they know it. Maybe like when we look under the hood, when we're looking at the EEG of their brain, we're like, oh, you have a little bit of ADHD. Usually people already kind of knew that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you tend a little towards, depressive type thoughts. Okay. Maybe they already knew that about themselves but they're always in that high functioning space and they're always looking to become better. And the people that we work with are specifically looking to become better so that they can help more people. Those are the people that we select. We don't run a high volume clinic because we want to work with the people who are aligned and we work with them very deeply.
Yeah. From just curious, because again, you have worked with companies that have 3x their growth
Yeah.
using this technology. Like, what's one of the most mind blowing kind of breakthroughs that you've seen with some of the methods that you guys are using?
Yeah, I mean, within our programs, so if we're always focused on the individual, but when we help individual leaders to become stronger, more resilient, better able to manage emotion, make better decisions, these kind of things are coming online. They lead better, right? And then I can help them on the executive coaching end to know how to make different decisions or who to, help them with hiring. I mean, there's a whole different suite of things that come in there. But what we have with business leaders are it's a wide range of capacity. Like some of them move from having massive anxiety that is basically rendering them not able to have their full function, but they look fine, right? Like it's that
Mhm.
appearance of, like for instance, one of the CEOs that I'm thinking of, he looked fine and looked like an amazing leader on the outside. Internally, he was barely strapping it together. Like he was kind of
Mm.
duct tape and popsicle sticks and hoping nobody's looking. And so how do we really change that reality so that he can stand strong as a man, stand strong as a leader, and be able to live a really different life? And so what we see in those kind of cases isn't just like, oh, he feels better internally, but that same man will have a different perception. Again, the size of the container that he's in now gets bigger because he's not constricted and bound and limited inside of this kind of like non-resilient space. So inside of that expansion, he's able to become more strategic, launch new enterprises or make the verticals that he's already working with work better, right? Hire better people, have less drama on the team. All of those things ultimately are going to impact the bottom line. They're all going to impact how many people that person is able to positively touch through their work. And it can be very exponential. I mean, in startups, we can see it like, 300x growth in a very short period of time. I've seen 3 times the growth in a company that's 100 years old in 3 years, right? So we're talking about really significant change in. And so if we look at it kind of holographically, there's the change inside of the hologram, as we know, there each little pixel of a hologram contains everything. So that's where we came up with Holon. So what we see inside of the pixel, so to speak, or that one picture of the leader is everything that they touch, and everything that they touch is also represented inside of them, right? So when we make those deep changes, if we're getting a 40% change, for instance, in a 5-day onsite, changing how someone's brain is working, we're going to get a many-fold yield in how their business is working. And that yield comes over time, right? Because as they have the chance to express it, it changes the course of their life.
Yeah. Okay. This is massive. Talk to me about that process, and I wanted to ask you, like, what does it look like to work? You just said 5-day on site. Is that like a typical journey where like people will come and they'll work with you just for 5 days intensive? It's like not 24 hours, but like 8 hours a day or something like that, where they'll do
Yeah.
this and then they leave. Like, yeah, what does that look like, that onboarding process?
Yeah, I mean, we have different programs, but I would say our signature is it is the benchmark of it is the 5-day onsite, but it's actually a 2-month long program at this point.
Mm,
We're building out more over time because there's so much that people can do at home. And I do want to get into that as well for
yeah.
just to help people know about what they can be doing at home. But our onsite, we have 2 part days and then 3 12-hour days, basically 12 plus hours days. And
Wow.
we're doing as much of the most advanced biohacking as we can in every day, along with, having incredible chef prepared meals, along with working with me one-on-one for debriefs and preps. This is a non-psychedelic experience, so we're not serving medicine, but we end up getting people into what feels like psychedelic states,
Wow.
right? So they're closing their eyes and they're dropping in with certain kind of preparation for neurofeedback therapy, and then with our equipment, because it is the most advanced and precise equipment that can be found on the planet, we're able to drop people into these altered states, and they're coming through with often huge vision quests, similar to what you would hear maybe in a psychedelic experience, or maybe it's just that they have a lot of neurofeedback therapy, which I want to take a moment just to explain because I don't know if everybody knows what that is really. But a lot of neurofeedback therapy, basically, if you administer it correctly, it creates an anesthetic. So you experience and realize things. You have memories come back to you, but it's in a way where it feels like the emotional volume is turned down. And so you can process it. And what
Mhm.
happens as we are able to safely process things that used to hold a massive emotional charge is that in the hippocampus, where the memory is stored, there's a protein that gets decoupled from the cells. And that basically that person is on a protein, very, very much anatomical structure free of the emotional charge of that thing, while they
Wow.
still remember what the event was. So that's really helpful because we don't want to just forget, right? Again, back to the pile of poo, we don't want to just pretend it's not there. There are powerful learnings and lessons. It might be like, hey, watch out for that kind of personality. Don't repeat that theme. It might be, hey, wow, maybe you can have forgiveness over what happened when you were a kid and restore a lot of your relationship with a parent or a sibling, right? But it could also just be like, whoa, the meaning of life. How do I want to be as a leader? Where am I doing that? Right? The accountability and the integrity that can come from the further processing of these things. But for us to not be afraid of them is a lot of what it is that I want in general, whether people are coming through our programs or not. Do not be afraid of what it is that's inside. Be courageous because it's through the courage that you can alchemize, that you can change, again, that yuck, that pile of poo, into your liberation and into those next steps and goals. And I feel like that ultimately that is it's deeper than and more powerful than any biohack. And people tend to put that on the to-do list, like, yeah, maybe someday I'll deal with that, maybe someday I'll release the emotions. And I'm like, yeah, what about right now? Handle it
Yeah.
right now. Let's do
Yeah.
it. Right? There's no time like the present to become free.
Yeah. Is it sustainable? Like, do the results last? Because it's just 5 days, and of course, like you said, there's always things you can do at your home on a
Yeah.
daily practice and stuff. But do you find that just that 5-day intensive actually can give, like, you know, life changing results that are actually sustainable?
Yeah, totally. We do. We have people come back. We have post tests. We have longitudinal information that shows that the initial changes basically happen because we have the neural architecture. It's basically, think of it like an electrical setup inside of a house. Like, you don't have any new wires by the time you leave in 5 days because the neurology takes about a millimeter a month, or it grows only about a millimeter a month, I should say. So we can only make immediate changes. For a lot of these folks, we're seeing a 40% change in the targets that we're going after. So if people say, I want these three things, we can get a 40% change from working with the existing electrical circuits, so to speak. And then over time, what happens, because it's such a deep pattern interrupt, is that the brain actually grows in even more. So that amount of growth can be quite variable, which is why we're building out more robust integration and really helping people to create the choices, find those choices that really support that growth, because we want to know, I mean, what's the upper limit of what's possible here? Like, how
Yeah.
much can we actually help someone? How radical can we have it be? But even if we were to, even in the context of knowing numbers, so sometimes symptomology is like the tip of an iceberg. If there's a symptom, it's because there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath the surface, right? So if we
Mm-hmm.
can get a 40% change, sometimes what that means, often what that means for the person is they no longer have that symptom. They no longer have that as an experience of their reality. We know that there's more that we can do beneath the surface, but they no longer experience themselves having those kinds of ruminating thoughts, for instance, like they used to. So we're used to seeing those kinds of shifts. And they do grow in over time, and people are always, they are changed unless they have, a massive traumatic, like a head trauma, or like there are some conditions around it, right, that we can't control for.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, it is really incredible. I think that's one of the most important things, is to know. So again, I'm going to repeat some things. Change can be super easy. It's worth being courageous to do it right now, no matter what you're doing. And then also that it can be lifelong, right? And then if we add in that it compounds, like the way that money compounds, the more free we get, the easier it is to get free. Just like the more money we earn in compounding interest, the more money we earn. Right. And so it's kind of like, why would we not get on this train? Like, however, whatever our jam is, I just want people to be encouraged, because to me, it's the jam.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, I always tell people I love the biohacking space, but I also have been around so much of the tech and stuff, and it's all really sexy and cool. And I always tell people, they're like, "Oh, what's your favorite, thing?" And I'm like, well, you know what? At the end of the day, like, I've been around a lot of expensive tech, and none of it really matters, because it's like you buy a car and it like wears off, and it's like, oh, that was a cool, fun, sexy thing I did, and it was,
Right.
but it wears off. It wears off. And I said, the only thing that's really going to matter at the end of the day is if you can master this thing, your mind,
That's right.
and that is the key. And so when that's what you're doing, you're actually changing that software
That's
in the
right.
brain, and so
Yeah,
you
I
can.
really feel like the intention of biohacking, if we hold it in a way that's healthy, is not to be competitive. It's not so we have metrics so that we can compete with our friends about who has the better HRV. Like, can we get off that train, right? Compete with what's possible,
Mm-hmm.
support each other. But really, the point of all this biohacking is to elevate our awareness, right? If we utilize biohacking from a reductionistic, I'm going to turn myself into a lab rat point of view, we're not going to get there.
Yeah.
If we're like, whoa, I'm going to use this as a part of my endeavor to deeply better myself as a human person, but also on a soul level, to like really get in touch with the depths of who I am. Now we start to access, it's a different mechanism in the body. When we believe in ourselves, when we see through the illusion, we can actually break through this level of kind of like a superficial understanding of ourselves as neat robots that just need
Mm.
inputs and outputs, which is sort of messed up. Like, it's accidental, and I know that it's easy to get there, and I've fallen into it myself. I don't have judgment, but if we think of ourselves as meat robots, we're probably not going to be happy, like probably not going to be totally fulfilled. We're a timeless soul on an endless journey, currently inside of an incredibly sophisticated biological being, reality, right? And if we can kind of hold the total picture of that, that's when we can get into more insight and more fulfillment, and really live in a wise way with as real leaders. To me, real leadership isn't answering to human constructs, it's answering to what is it that I'm being asked to do in this lifetime, and what is my deepest service. And you don't get those answers from the mind, you get them when you reach beyond the mind, when you reach out of when you know that you're in a container and you're like, I'm going to reach to the next level, even if I don't know what that means. I don't have to know, I just know that that's my quest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I wanted to ask you, and it's so funny because we jumped on, and we just, we just started. I think I almost assumed everybody knew what neurofeedback was, and I didn't do a good job of
Yeah.
probably talking about some of that, just because I kind of assumed, we've talked about this before, but could you also maybe give people a little just small background on what we're doing with neurofeedback? And I'm sure people that have listened to the show know, like, hey, there's alpha and theta and gamma and
Yeah.
beta brainwaves, and you're modulating these brainwaves. And just also what I would love to hear is just, there's, if anybody's, after they're hearing this episode, they're going to go Google neurofeedback, and they're probably going to see a lot. They're going to see their systems, at
Mhm.
home systems, like the Neuro Optimal, which is a very
Yeah.
popular brand. And I think they have systems out there for like 10 grand, and it's like, I've heard the way that one explains it, and there's no coaching, it's not like specifically directed. It kind of looks at your brainwaves and then like reflects it back to you, is kind of the way I understood it. And there's
Mhm.
other ones where they actually target and specifically upregulate alpha, and alpha is like this calming meditative state, and it's where you can get into flow and stuff. And then you got other ones that are, similar to what you're doing, but I have no idea. Like 40 Years of Zen by Dave Asprey. I think he does a 5-day on-site, something in similar. But so, like, how
Mhm.
is what you guys doing with Holon? Number one is, what generally is neurofeedback in general?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing to modulate these brainwaves? And then secondly, like, how does it compare to just all these other realms of neurofeedback that are out there?
Yeah. Thanks, Joel, for anchoring us back into that, because I don't mean to leave people out of the loop. So, speaking about what neurofeedback therapy is, again, it's been around since the 1960s, and we use other neurotherapies as well, but I'll get into that in a moment. So, neurofeedback therapy is literally just helping the brain to communicate to itself how it's doing. So it is taking leads or electrodes, sensors that are put on the scalp. And in neurofeedback therapy, there is no current being put in, it's only sensing. And then that information is put into a computer. The computer has basically been set to do a certain kind of training. So, similar to how when we do weight training, there's different exercises for different functions, right? So, we can tell the brain, hey, be careful that you're not going down that anxiety or like rumination and overthinking loop. And this training right now, we're going to focus on that. So, if the person starts to go down the road of anxiety and overthinking, they don't get the right feedback, because again, it's neurofeedback, right? So
Mm,
the computer doesn't give them the sound and or the sight and sound that they are intended to see or hear. So this isn't happening at the level of the mind. The mind can't figure this out. The brain is moving at about 40 milliseconds, and the mind's perception of whether those sights and sounds are happening is like 250 milliseconds. So the brain actually has no idea what's going on, other than maybe in this instance, you're sitting there, you have your hands in your lap, and you're controlling a video game on the screen with your brain. It's so
yeah.
fun, right? So the mind, no, mind is like, oh, cool. The video game is doing whatever it's doing. Meanwhile, the brain is rapidly problem solving in ways that we can't even conceive of, to make sure that it's not going down those, in this case, rumination, overthinking, worry kind of loops. So the brain reroutes to a positive way of utilizing its neural architecture, and now it likes that. And the person starts to feel physiologically better. They have a better shift in their emotions. They're like, dude, I'm so chill right now. This is great. And meanwhile, because the brain is so much more, I'll say, intelligent than the mind, it's learning and it's saying, I like this. This is a really cool new reset point, and I want to come back to it. If you do that, if you give it that signal often enough, it is real learning. So the brain knows how to steer in that way and function in that way ongoingly. And so we can train, like you said, alpha and theta and gamma, and we can even put waves together. We, in our laboratory, we work with synchrony. We work beyond coherence. Coherence is it, it's not as aligned, and it's not as precise as synchrony. We make sure that the waves are the right size. We grow them in their amplitude in ways that are healthy. We also make sure that they originate from certain parts of the brain and move to other parts of the brain and don't appear in some. Like theta is super cool if you're if it's being generated correctly. It helps with a lot of creative problem solving. If you want to know kind of the correlate in business speak into the brain for creative problem solving, it's probably theta with some gamma mixed in. But if you have theta in the wrong part of the brain at the wrong time, it can be really severe ADD or ADHD, right? Or it could even be kind of feeling a little unhinged. So really, you got to make sure that you're using the therapies correctly, and know what you're doing. Kind of back to the point earlier about why is it not widely done. Um, so we do in addition to brainwave training, we do circuits and networks training at a very high level. So the salient mode, the default mode network, some of these things that are helping us to regulate what we think reality is, what our threat detection systems look like. We get into cerebellar training. We get in and can train the thalamus. So we can train substructures within the brain. We can train communication networks within the brain. And we can do all of that with timing, with how much signal is being sent and how it's being regulated. Because the brain is actually a massive symphony, and the understanding of waves is actually just a tiny fraction of what it is that's going on. So we're looking at all of that concurrently, and we're also looking at it inside of the context of a body of medicine that basically nobody but us has, because Dr. Drew and I have created it together. Again, with him being the lead neuroscientist, and me being a really super great guinea pig for a lot of testing because of my innate capacities and my innate sensitivities and my ability to name things. We've basically taken what's in those research journal articles and extrapolated and created a whole new body of medicine where we have, I believe Dr. Drew's worked with 100,000 people now. In the course of his 27-year career, he has worked a huge number of hours, and in that really been able to create new theories and test and get results, because we are clinicians, not researchers by our fundamental nature. We know if we're doing the right thing by someone because they either flourish or they don't, right? Luckily, he's got enough of a basis of understanding that he can help them to always flourish, which is amazing. So I think that covers a lot of those first
Yeah. Oh,
questions.
that was
We
really
also
good.
do TDCS and there's a lot of other technology that we use that is neuro, but we also have things like the CVAC, the cyclic variable altitude chamber. We've got a pulse PEMF. We have some of the most like hot rod equipment on the planet. We also really love the Neurovisor. Shout out to Neurovisor for those that are listening that want a price point that's more approachable. I can't prescribe anything for anyone that I haven't met, so this is not a prescription. But for many people, the Neurovisor at its $600 price tag, if they don't have seizures or other contraindications, can be a game changer. So that's a
Really, Neurovisor, and that's
photobiomodulation.
something that you can just get at home and use.
Yeah, exactly. It's photobiomodulation with sound, and so it's a light system you put over your eyes. You wear it
Yeah.
on a visor, hence the name. It's a little setup, and you can wear your whatever headphones you have at home, and it runs on an app on your phone. And there's massive couple we in our testing, we've seen a couple standard deviations of change, and we really advocate that as a quick. It's a 12-minute reboot that can get you a lot of yield. And it's safe for most people, but please, again, read the fine print, make sure it's safe for you, because I can't prescribe anybody anything that I haven't met.
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's helpful. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
yeah, totally. I really, I know that our programs are expensive, they are high touch, they are completely worth it. But I also just want people to know all the way through, like, what can you do that's easier? A lot of stuff that's not sexy, like sleep, eat real food, be careful. Maybe intermittent fasting is or isn't good for you. Pay attention. Trust your body more than you trust data. Um, that kind of a thing. Like I said, like, it's not all the sexy, like, cool toys element of it, but it is the stuff that matters the most.
For
Where's your
sure.
heart? How is your heart? Are you in touch with it? Don't mean to be like, too off into the mushy stuff, but if your emotional and spiritual well-being isn't on point, it doesn't matter what you have for biohacking, because it's
Yeah.
just, you're working against it at that point. So
Yep.
anyway, I want to go back to your question about at-home systems. I don't want to be disparaging about any of it. I do know that some of the systems, for instance, that are interested in building alpha try to do that frontally, meaning here, that's not the place that you want to build or measure alpha. There are a lot of people that unfortunately use devices, have created devices that are either not effective, they do very marginal things, or they can be actually harmful. So, and I know this could sound like I'm just promoting him because he's my colleague, but honestly, when I realized how this field was, Dr. Drew and I started talking about how do we democratize neurofeedback therapy. Because if you see a clinician, even, geez, it's like $800 maybe, or $1,000 for your first assessment that includes the EEG. And then
Yeah.
maybe it's $200 or $300 per session. This is not approachable, right?
Correct.
And
And that's
so,
how much I spent for my kids doing that. It was about $800 for the EEG. And then you're looking at 100, 150 typically for per session. And
yeah,
again, if you go out and get a neurooptimal home system, you just want to buy it on your own, those are like 10 grand. So, I mean, for me, I'm always happy to, that's why I ask, because it's like, would I rather do all those things and not get the results I'm looking for? Or would I rather just invest 25 grand, let's say with you guys, and at least I
right.
know I can save up for that and do that versus
That's
spending
right.
10 over, you know what I mean? So it's like, for me, it's
That's
great to hear for somebody like an expert in the industry like you, like, where should we put our attention and intention?
right. Well,
Yeah.
and so, when the only thing that I can say off the shelf that I stand behind is has been created by my colleague. And I promise there's not even an affiliate code. I don't want any skin in the game because that's how clean I like this all to be. So he developed a product called Sensei, and you can find it at sens.ai. And it's less than 2K. I don't even know how much it is because I bought mine a while back.
So
But
funny that
anyways,
you
for
brought
less,
this up. I just had one of my old coaches who does a lot of human potential coaching and stuff, and he's in the biohacking space. He just mentioned that as well, Dr. Mark Atkinson, and he's actually an advisor for
Dr. Mark is a great friend of both of ours.
yeah. And
Incredible
I never
human.
heard of
Yeah.
Sensei, and he recommended that as well. So this is so
Yeah.
cool.
He's he's part of the advisory, and all three of us have been friends for a number of years. We all really respect and appreciate each other in a very deep way. So that's awesome. Yeah. So the Sensei it's safe and effective, and it's not crazy expensive. And it's got an app that's like, I think, around the $250 ish mark per person, but more than one person can use that headset.
Hmm.
So this is moving in toward democratizing. I know that it's still going to be out of reach for some folks, but they could save up for it and utilize it. And there's also HRV training on there, so not just measurement, but
Wow.
actually changing HRV at a high level of precision. But it has extremely precise training. So I really do feel good about advocating that. Um, and then, as far as there are a couple of other programs that exist that do on-site um, neurofeedback therapy at depth. We have the most advanced hardware and software in the world. A lot of them are basically, the others, as far as I know, can only do wave training, which is great. But really, it's extremely limited, and you can get wave training from a sensei. So
Wow.
for 1,200 to
I
a
think it's like
thousand,
$1,500,
$2,000.
1,200, $1,500. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's somewhere. So let's say it's $1,500 just for the purposes of our conversation to buy it, and then $250 a year. If you can get that at home, then I wouldn't personally spend the money to go to a retreat what they have to offer. um, but I mean, to everybody their own. If they whatever they feel called to go do. For us, we're far more precise because Dr. Drew's got an extremely high skill level. He was just at a conference with a bunch of Harvard folks, and they were all in awe that we're doing this. So
Mm.
we're really excited to be sharing more with the world of academia, about what it is that we're up to, because essentially we've just been quietly creating miracles. And working by word of mouth. So it's exciting to be talking about it more, and bring forward what we've been doing for decades,
Yeah.
really, you know.
I wanted to ask you, I know we're running up on the hour here, but I did want to ask you a question that popped into my mind. As you see people's brains change and you see it also from just the science perspective, I'm just curious though, from you, like, what have you seen? What have you learned, and how we think about the quantum and we think about this higher
Mm.
being of consciousness for us? How has your studies in the brain, like what have you seen and how they like connect? And that makes sense. You go, ah, that's why, again, the spiritual people were saying this, but now I actually see it in the brain and I see the leaders that we work with transform. Like, but how has
Right.
that helped you tap more into what we call the quantum or higher spiritual consciousness? How has the brain training helped with that?
Oh, I mean, it's been massive for myself. The just on a personal level, the first time that Dr. Drew mapped my brain with an EEG, he's like, "Whoa, you are in the 0.01% of most intuitive, tapped in people." And I, of course, didn't have any numbers for it. I just knew what I'd been doing with my work prior to that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's fun. But really understanding that basically any of these ecstatic states, any of these skills that we can tap into, if we want to call it like the kind of the spectrum of flow states, on up into maybe the places that we hit when we're in lovemaking or when we're working with psychedelics, we can hit all, we can be in a greater access point of all of those things by working directly with the brain. But we can also measure and understand and quantify all of it by looking at the brain. Like there isn't a human experience that can't be understood by looking at the brain. Now, do we understand everything? No, you know, because there are just so many different states of being. But it's incredible and awe-inspiring, basically, to feel like, okay, wait, there is some hardcore science that backs up. Actually, we just sat in on a conference again with a bunch of Harvard folks, and it's like, studying speaking in tongues and channeling and the depths of devotion and prayer in these transcendent states, these mystical experiences that people can hit. And we've all been studying, and in our case, we've actually been helping people to design their neuroarchitecture to actually grow the structure so that they can hit those states on demand.
Mm.
So, whether that's that they want a generalized feeling of wisdom and joy together, and then also a better sex life because they suddenly have capacity to feel their body so much better and
Mm.
to release and let go so much better. Okay, great, right? Like, I mean, that's again, there's no side quest when it comes to improving ourselves, because if we can hit those transcendent states, that means that something will transform, and we then become a better leader or a better parent the next day, right? And we know maybe we've had some experiences of that, but how do we do that in a way that's quantifiable and can be replicated, and also be kind of hardwired into the way that we function so that it's just our new normal? And that's a really exciting frontier,
Yeah.
I think, for all of us, right? Like we all have that desire and that quest to grow. But if we can think of it in terms of quantum, in terms of exponential, and not inside of limited and restricted, and know that we don't know, and then utilize some really hardcore science to get there. I mean, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I got two more questions, and then I want to
Okay.
wrap it up and give a call to action where people can find you and learn more what you're
Yeah.
doing. But what's one of like the one trait that you would say that separates the elite leaders that you're with from the average ones?
The elite leaders that we work with are driven by their desire to change and this foundational, kind of like a warrior's rally cry that's like, whatever I've got to do to be a better person, leader, whatever, to accomplish my mission, right? Where they get themselves out of the way and they're not thinking the I, me, mine, and I have to make more money so I can prove it to people so that I can I, right? When
Hmm.
they shift into that bigger, deeper purpose and meaning, I feel like that they hit a whole nother level of capacity. It's like they're actually granted that capacity. And it works that way neurologically. If it's coming from insecurity, the brain is going to function in one way, and it's just not going to have the horsepower, and move with the specificity and the global way of firing, as if they are in that space of the bigger rally cry, the bigger why.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. And then I wanted to ask you, like, what's an unconventional, just daily practice that high achievers might overlook, but that could actually change everything?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question. It's I've been working with for many decades, honestly, this breath. and I have a recording of it for free on the website. But what I love about it is, you know, we're not always available for a Wim Hof. Like if you start Wim Hofing in the boardroom, people are going to be like, dude, not
Take your
working.
shirt off and
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
you're breathing heavy.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not going to
right,
work.
right, right. Yeah, and bang on your chest like a, you know, like get the qigong thing
Like a
going. Yeah,
Dutch
it's not
man.
going to
Yeah.
work. It's better to have. We want those tools. Breathwork's freaking amazing. Like I love it. But what I can say is that if we work with the breath in a way that's really natural and kind of low pro, and we can work with it with eyes closed and eyes open, now we can basically, I'm going to call it slip out of the matrix,
Mm.
slip into a state of autonomic nervous system regulation, and also be able to see through illusion and feel the interconnectedness, the connectedness to our body and to whoever it is that we're interacting with. And it all happens very, very efficiently with this practice. So I just named it the Holon breath practice. And that recording is available to everyone. And I want to just say that for people who practice it, let's say 5 or 10 minutes a day in a focused way, and then kind of throughout the day coming back to it, they
Mm.
get phenomenal change just with that. And we don't have enough data for me to say intelligently, but I'm going to say on an analogy level, it feels very similar to alpha. There's an embodied, practical, grounded, open, clear, meditative state that happens deeply when you have your eyes closed, but it even shifts like that with our eyes open, which I think the point of meditation is really not to just sit still with our eyes closed, but to impact our eyes open reality. So with this breath, you
Mm.
can kind of stealthfully, skillfully weave it through every moment of your life. And if you feel a little bit off course, you just bring it right back. And you work inside of this precision of alignment that is grounded and present and strong and clear all the way through.
That's so cool. And so if people go to Holon, HOLON, the website, the Holon experience, is that where they can get this breath work?
That's right. Yeah, there's a little pop-up box. You know, it'll help to loop you in on. We'll send you other notes, and we have
So
a lot of
subscribe to
things
the
that you
newsletter and
do
then you guys
for free.
include that there. Is that what it is?
I'm sorry.
If you subscribe to like the newsletter, is that where how people can get this breath work?
Yeah, the breath work
Okay.
is actually the sign up, but just so people know
Yeah.
that that'll put them on the newsletter. So there's more information. We do not overpopulate. We do not, as you might see, like I just really want to support. Dr. Drew and I are hugely aligned with supporting people in changing their lives. So we have that whole on breath practice. We have newsletters. We have community calls. We want people to be engaged. We're going to be doing more with social and all of that kind of stuff probably at some point. It's not natural for us. We're doctors. We like to change
Yeah.
lives
Yeah.
in a one-on-one way. But there's just going to be a lot more information coming out. And yeah, and as much of it that we can, again, democratize and make easy to access, we will. And then for those that feel called to go for a very, very top shelf experience, you can also send in an application on our website. You can see what the different, I have only really talked about one of our offerings. You can look at what else exists and then just send in a generalized application. And then somebody will meet with you and help to find, you know, is this the right fit? Which program, if any? Yeah. And if not, then what's the right tool for the next step?
Yeah.
So
Amazing. So much cool stuff that you guys are up to. This was great. I could talk to you all day. I feel like we'll have to do a round two at some point because this is just
um,
I had a lot more to ask you, but we we just scratched the surface. Dr. Amy Albright, just tell everybody where the website where they can connect with you. And then I know, is there anywhere else though that you guys are on active on social? Is Holon, if people want to connect with you on Instagram, is that like a good place to go, or do you just recommend the website?
the website is our best and strongest right now. The Instagram I haven't even touched in 5 years, if I'm honest. Like really
Okay,
and
cool.
truly, I've it's a place to grow.
Yeah.
So the website is Holon HOLON experience.com. And that's where you can get that breath practice and then see what else we offer. Yeah. Thank you so
Amazing.
much, Phil. I agree. We
Yeah.
could totally talk forever. It's been really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, this was amazing. Dr. Amy Albright from Holon, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate you.
Thank you.